everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Clockwork Kitchen, where I teach you all the basics that you need to know to make some really fantastic food. Today we're going to be talking about different types of cooking oil, and I'm really excited because it's my first audience requested video. Thanks so much for the request, Dave. We're going to cover 6 main types of oil: olive oil, canola oil, sesame oil, coconut oil, oil in a spray can, and what I like to call high smoke point oils, which include avocado oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, and a myriad of others. I'm going to talk about the main differences between these oils and when you should use each oil when you're cooking. What we're not going to talk about is all the health pros and cons of these oils. There's a lot of information out there about how much saturated fat this oil has or how much omega fatty acid that oil has. And to be honest, it's just not something that I worry about. And unless your doctor has told you otherwise, I don't think it's something that you need to worry about either. You have to cook your food in some kind of fat, whether that's oil, butter, bacon grease, you name it, and oil is a really great option. And unless you're deep frying all of your food, you're not using that much oil anyway, so just push that worry out of your mind. As you can see, we're outside today. DC has just been really rainy and dreary and dark, and our apartment was just way too dark to film in, so I figured, let's get outside, let's walk around, and I'll just take you guys with me and teach you about oil along the way. All right, now that we've got that covered, let's talk about some olive oil. Olive oil is the most common type of cooking oil, and it comes in 3 main varieties: light, virgin, which is what you'll usually see in the store as almost unmarked olive oil, and extra virgin olive oil. But to make it even simpler for you, I normally think of it as just 2 categories: extra virgin and anything that's not extra virgin. The main differences between these olive oils is smoke point and flavor. Smoke point is basically how hot something can get before it starts to burn. So for example, butter has a pretty low smoke point. It's what allows us to get really wonderful brown butter, but it also means that your butter can burn really easily, especially if you walk away and forget about it on the stove. Oil in general has a higher smoke point than butter, and then in terms of the olive oil spectrum, your light olive oil is going to have the highest smoke point and extra virgin has the lowest smoke point. But we are talking a matter of about 50 degrees here, so I still think that extra virgin is fine to use for your overall use from sautéing to baking. The other main difference between these 3 types of olive oils is flavor, and it's why Ike and I use extra virgin olive oil as our everyday oil. We just like the flavor a lot better. All of these oils are made with olives. What differs is the process that's used to create them. Extra virgin olive oil is the oil that comes from the first press of those olives. So a lot of times on bottles, you'll see things like cold pressed, and that's usually just referring to the way that it's processed. Sometimes extra virgin olive oil will also be filtered, but in general, it's not processed beyond that pressing. Light and virgin olive oils are made by taking those olives that have already been used for extra virgin olive oil, they're repressed, sometimes they're heat treated to get the most possible oil out of them. And so that just makes them a little bit lower quality in that sense. It's also what makes them look lighter in color, what makes their flavor a lot more neutral, and what makes their smoke point higher. Now, when I'm talking about flavor, obviously when you try olive oil by itself, you're not just going to be like, wow, that tastes like olives. It's not going to have all that brininess and meatiness that olives have. But what olive oil does pick up is those subtler olive flavors. So for example, Greek olive oil tends to taste a little bit spicier. Italian olive oil tends to taste a little bit sweeter. Not sugary sweet and not like super hot spicy sweet, but just kind of these subtle notes that you'll taste in the background. Also, a good rule of thumb when you're cooking with olive oil is you shouldn't necessarily be able to taste the oil. You shouldn't like try a saute dish and be like, wow, I really taste that olive oil, because then you're probably using too much. It's meant to just be a very, very subtle background flavor. Now, in case you couldn't tell, there is a wide spectrum underneath just the extra virgin olive oil umbrella. So as I said, Ike and I use extra virgin olive oil as our everyday olive oil, but we're using a kind of lower quality one. So this would cost maybe $5 to $8 a bottle, at least in DC. The olives used just aren't of the most highest quality, and so it just means that the oil is going to have a little bit of a lighter flavor to it. Then there are the higher end extra virgin olive oils. As I mentioned, this oil is made from just pressing olives, so it really comes down to the quality of those olives, and high-end extra virgin olive oil has higher quality olives, and you really pick up on those flavors. It's not that you can't cook with higher quality extra virgin olive oil or fancy extra virgin olive oil. It's just that you'd be completely wasting your money to do that. Extra virgin olive oil can be just as complex as wine when it comes to its flavor. So if you then add that onto heat and cook with it, you're going to reduce those flavors or mask them, which is just not what you want to do when you're paying a good amount per bottle. So instead you want to finish with this oil, whether you're putting it on top of salads or on top of pasta or on top of pizza. Adding that oil on the top means it's the first thing that's going to hit your mouth when you take a bite, and you're really going to get that flavor profile, and it's going to completely change the way that your dish tastes. When you're picking out your higher quality olive oil, I would highly recommend that you taste it if possible. Because the flavors of these oils can be so complex and like hit you in the face, you want to make sure that you actually like them. Maybe you don't like spicy olive oil, or maybe you don't like sweeter olive oil. Sometimes places like Whole Foods or Mom's Organic or other organic grocery stores will offer tastings, especially if they're not selling them by the bottle. Or you can also go to specific stores that sell olive oil and vinegar, and a lot of times they'll have ways for you to taste them. So if you're able to do that, I would highly recommend it. Another thing to keep in mind with higher quality oils is you really do not want to cling on to these oils. I know I compared the flavor to wine, but in terms of aging, they do not age like wine. Olive oil does not get better with time, it will get way worse. So do not stockpile these olive oils in your pantry. When you buy them, you want to use them pretty soon. I know it kind of feels like you want to hold on to them because it's a really nice bottle of olive oil, but if you keep that in your pantry for too long and come back to try to use it, it's probably gonna have lost a lot of its flavor and might even be rancid at that point. So use your nice olive oils. Whew, okay, so that's olive oil. Let's move on to canola and vegetable oil. Next, we're gonna talk about canola and vegetable oils. They're both very neutral oils and can be used pretty interchangeably. So for the rest of the video, I don't want to keep saying canola and vegetable oils, so I'm just going to say canola oil and just know that I mean both of those oils. Canola oil comes from the rapeseed plant, yes, rapeseed, and vegetable oil comes from soybeans. Both of these create, as I said, a very neutral tasting oil. It has a very high smoke point, and they're also pretty cheap, and you can find them at a lot of different grocery stores. We like to use this for any kind of cooking where olive oil is just too deep of a flavor, or where we really do need a high smoke point. So for example, when we're cooking Indian food or any other kind of Asian food, we usually don't want the light flavor of olive oil in there. We usually want just an extremely neutral oil, so we'll use canola oil. Also, when we are making Asian food, a lot of time we're making it in a wok, and you do have to cook that over a very high heat. So canola oil is just easier to use in that case. Along those lines, canola oil is also the one that you want to use when you're deep frying. When you are deep frying, you want to make sure that you're maintaining a consistent temperature throughout that oil. You are usually cooking it at a relatively high temperature, and so canola oil is just going to be able to handle that a lot better. Also, when you're deep frying, you do need to use a lot of oil to do that, and since canola oil is cheaper, it's just easier to buy a really huge bottle of canola oil and use that. A really large bottle of olive oil like that will probably cost you way more. Sesame oil is something that I thought I could live without for the longest time. And if you don't cook a lot of Asian food, then that's probably still true for you. I used to see sesame oil listed in recipes and think, well, if I use canola oil and some sesame seeds, it'll probably be exactly the same, right? Wrong. Sesame oil comes from sesame seeds, obviously. You want to make sure when you're buying it that you look for a bottle that says toasted on it. It's what's going to give you that really wonderful, nutty, deep, rich flavor. It works amazing in Asian cooking, and it has been a game changer for stir fries, like the #1 thing that has made them taste that much better. I am going to do a whole video on how to make stir fries, so stay tuned for that one, but just know that sesame oil completely elevates the entire dish. It is a little expensive, so I usually use a combination between sesame oil and canola oil because a little bit goes a long way as well, but I still probably use a little bit more than I should because I just really like the flavor that much, but that's completely your choice. If you're able, I also highly recommend buying it at an Asian grocery store if you have one near you. You can buy them in these really large tin cans, and they're significantly less expensive than buying the little bottles from like a Giant or a Whole Foods. We buy the really large can and then just refill the small bottle as we need to. Sesame oil has a pretty high smoke point, maybe not quite as high as canola oil, but that's what makes it work really well in woks when you're cooking on super high heat. Beyond cooking though, because I really do like its flavor, I've also used it in dressings and to top on Asian dishes. Next up is coconut oil. Coconut oil has risen in popularity over the last 5 years or so as a healthier version to olive oil. I'm not sure how much I believe that, but it's still fun to use. There are two types of coconut oil, refined and unrefined, or what's sometimes called virgin coconut oil. In this case, refined does not refer to how glamorous it is, but how processed it is. So refined coconut oil is highly processed. It's what's going to give it a more neutral flavor. It's not going to taste like coconut at all. It's going to have a pretty high smoke point, and you can use it for most types of cooking, except for maybe not deep frying. I suppose with the smoke point, you could deep fry with it if you wanted to, but it would be ridiculously expensive to buy that much coconut oil. The other type of coconut oil is called unrefined or virgin coconut oil. This is the one that tastes actually like coconuts. It has a little bit of a lower smoke point, so I would use it like you would extra virgin olive oil, and it's gonna give your dishes a wonderful coconutty flavor. So that's great to use in Asian dishes, Indian cooking, Caribbean cooking. It'll add a really fun dimension of flavor to your dish. To me, one of the hardest things with coconut oil is how to get it from the jar into your pan. In the summertime, it's a little bit easier because it's warmer out. You could just leave the jar on your counter and that coconut oil will eventually liquefy, and then you can just measure it out and put it into your pan. But in the winter, as it is now, it solidifies into a solid state, and so it's a little bit harder to get it out of the jar. What we do is take a spoon, scoop some out, and then place it against a pan that's already over the fire. And slowly that oil will heat up a little bit and start to liquefy, at least the part that's like touching the spoon, and then you'll be able to slide it right off the spoon and into your pan. Something else to keep in mind is that when you see measurements for coconut oil in recipes, they're usually referring to the liquid form of coconut oil. And the solid form and the liquid form are a little bit different. So from that spoon that I used earlier, that's only a little dollop of coconut oil, but it probably yields about 2 tablespoons of oil in liquid form. So just keep that in mind when you're measuring it out for any recipes. We are over the hump, my friends. Oil number 5 is oil in a spray can. You can get all kinds of oils in spray cans, from olive oil to canola oil to even coconut oil. I don't really use it all that often, but I know that it's a common pantry item in a lot of households, so I wanted to be sure to address it. I primarily use oil in a spray can when using any other kind of oil would be extremely annoying. So the main one that comes to mind is muffin tins. It is really annoying to have to get out a stick of butter or some olive oil and try to grease each little muffin tin, so I much prefer using a spray can. Same situation for a crock pot. It's just a lot easier to use that spray can. Otherwise though, I don't really use it very often. I'm not a huge fan of the flavor that comes from those cans. I don't know if it's just because it's shelf stable and that means that they dilute the flavor a little bit in general, or because of the can itself, that metal tends to kind of affect the flavor as well. But I'm just not the biggest fan of it, so I only use it in certain situations. The last oil that I want to talk about is actually a group of oils that I like to call high smoke point oils. These include avocado oil, peanut oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, and a ton more. They're a lot like canola oil in the sense that they have that high smoke point, and therefore they're really good to use not just for everyday cooking, but also for things where you're using really high heat like deep frying or stir frying. They do have a slightly better flavor than canola oil, but that also means that they're usually going to be a little bit more expensive. I have seen places like Costco have really good deals on these, so just check around your local grocery stores and compare some prices. Something else that you might see is that these oils tend to get blended a little bit into the same bottle. So I think my parents one time bought a grapeseed / sunflower oil blend that they really liked using, and I think that those will serve the same purpose as the pure versions. So that's a lot of cooking oils, and you might be asking yourself, do I need to use all of these? How many do I really need? And the answer is, luckily, not all of them. So to give you an example, as I said, Ike and I use extra virgin olive oil for our everyday use, and then we have a fancier olive oil for topping. We use sesame oil for stir fries, canola oil for deep frying, and then we also have some oil in a can and coconut oil on hand, but we use those maybe once or twice a year, pretty sparingly. But you don't even need to have that much. I recommend by starting off picking out your everyday oil. Olive oil is the most common, but if you're really digging sunflower oil and it's not going to break the bank, then go for it. After that, I would also just recommend always having some canola oil on hand. It's great to have a neutral oil that you can go to that's really cheap to buy. So those are the two that you really need to start off with. From there, buy oils that you will actually use as the need arises. You do not want to be stockpiling a ton of oils. Oil has a shelf life. So if you buy a bunch of oils that you don't use very often, you'll have wasted your money and they'll probably go rancid by the time you get around to using them. It's also important to think about how you're storing your oils. I recommend keeping them in a cool, dark place. We keep our everyday olive oil on the counter and put everything else away in our cabinet, but our kitchen is pretty dark. If your kitchen is full of sun, then I would recommend putting all of your oils away in a cabinet and definitely not leaving them exposed to direct sunlight. We also have these little bottles that can be used to drizzle olive oil and have one of those little tops that allow a really nice stream of oil to come out. So you could buy one of these and put your everyday oil in that and then store the rest of that big bottle away in a cabinet. And I also really like these little bottles because I think it creates a nice, easy stream to work with. Sometimes when you pour straight from the bottle, you end up with this really big glug of oil and it can just be harder to control. I also don't recommend storing your oil in the fridge. Aside from the fact that your oil is then going to solidify and it can be harder to get out of the bottle, storing it in the fridge is sometimes thought of as a way to preserve the oil for longer, but you actually might end up damaging the flavor. There are a lot of smells and things in your refrigerator, even if you yourself can't smell it. And so those smells will permeate through the bottle when you store it in the fridge, and the flavor might go off a lot faster than if you store it in a cabinet. I also want to stress that you should not stress about specific oils that recipes call for. A lot of these oils really can be used interchangeably, and so even if the recipe says to use coconut oil or canola oil, you can probably use olive oil in most cases and it'll still taste fine and it'll still cook up just fine. I've said this a lot and I'll say it again, and I'm probably gonna start to sound like a broken record, but as long as you're cooking your meat to the right temperature and you're not doing things that are gonna make you sick, cooking is all about your personal preference. What tastes good to you, what you enjoy using, what you already have around and don't feel like you need to run out to the store to buy something totally different. It's all about what you like. And that's the fun part of cooking. You get to experiment and try things out and make things your own. And that's what I really enjoy about cooking. And I hope that through these videos, I can help you figure out what your personal preference is and what you enjoy making. That was a lot to cover today. I really hope that it was helpful for you. If you figure out what oil you'd like to use as your everyday oil, or if you decide to buy other oils and use them, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments down below or over on Instagram at Clockwork Kitchen. I'll put the handle right here somewhere. As always, give this video a thumbs up to support my channel. Hit the subscribe button and the bell icon down below to be notified next time I post. And let me know what you'd like to learn about next time on Clockwork Kitchen. See you later.